Hello everyone. In this video, I'm going to read chapter 7 in our book Just Dance by Patricia McLaughlin. Blue Eyes, Yellow Eyes. I rode Molly today. I knew where I was going and I left early before it became too warm for Molly. There was no wind and I could already feel the sun's heat. We rode along the road. My mother singing, of course, music from the magic flute to the crazed chickens. I realized I was smiling, and I didn't know why. I put my hand in my pocket and I found Bud's folded up haiku there. Molly liked being out on the road. She tossed her head and began to trot. I turned her up the hill where she had never been before. She didn't mind. We rode up the hill, past trees and clearings, hearing the songs of birds. Molly tossed her head again. And then, past the field of forest sheep, we came to Tinker's cabin. Tinker was on the porch reading a book. I slid down off Molly and looped her reins over a low tree branch in the shade. Tinker looked up and called to me, "Sylvie Bloom, the writer of haikus." Tinker walked down the steps and filled a pail with fresh water. "Good morning, Tinker." Tinker carried the pail over to Molly. She nosed his neck, making him smile. "Molly's thanking you," I said. "She's welcome," said Tinker. His eyes were sharp and steady, and a blue I had no name for. I sat on the top step and leaned against the porch post. Tinker sat in his chair, his long, lean legs stretched out. "It was good the sheriff hired you. It was a wise choice." "I like Bud, and I'm finding out a lot more about where I live. What's happening, sometimes surprising things. Surprising people, like you." I was looking out of the meadow, the sheep and Molly in the shade. "Anne," said Tinker in a hushed voice, "if you turn your head very slowly toward me, you'll see something surprising. Slowly, remember?" I slowly turned my head and looked into the very close yellow eyes of Tinker's coyote. I held my breath as Bernie stared at me for a long time. Then he sat. There were black spots like marbles in the middle of the yellow. He was so close. "Ah, Bernie likes you," said Tinker. "I knew he would. You can talk, Sylvie." "But I wouldn't touch him yet. That will come later on your next visit." Later on my next visit? I could hear my heart beating. "Bernie," I said softly. Bernie's ears went up, but he didn't move. He sat and watched. I smiled. "You're beautiful, Bernie." He tilted his head as if considering this compliment. The three of us sat on the porch for a long time, Bernie, Tinker, and I. "My mother was a famous opera singer," I said suddenly before I could stop myself. Tinker did not look surprised. He nodded. "I know that. I once heard her sing with James Grayston in London." "Really?" "Really," said Tinker. "I was a real traveler earlier in my life. Your mother has a stunningly beautiful voice." I took a breath. "James Grayston is coming to the city to perform," I said. "He has a beautiful voice too," said Tinker. "Why do you think she doesn't sing on stage anymore?" Tinker turned to look at me. "Perhaps it wasn't enough for her," he said. "What more could there be?" I asked. "You're sitting next to him," Tinker said softly. "For me," he added. I turned to look into Bernie's yellow eyes. "Bernie?" I whispered. "Think about it, Sylvie," said Tinker. "Think about it." Tinker kept looking at me. Suddenly, the sun came from behind a cloud. It was overhead, getting too hot for Molly. I got up to say goodbye. Bernie never moved. I walked down the steps, Tinker following me. Before I left, I suddenly hugged Tinker. "No one hugs me," he said, looking startled. "I do," I said. I got up on Molly. "Come again," said Tinker. "I will." And as I rode off, Tinker called to me. "Think about it, Sylvie. You almost know." For some reason, as I rode off, I felt tears at the edges of my eyes. What was it I almost knew? Molly and I went past the sheep meadow, past the woods, and down the hill again to the main road through town. It was hot, and I was sorry I had waited so long to ride Molly home, even though Tinker had given her a pail of water. We rode close to a car parked by the nature walk. The car windows were closed in the heat, except for the back windows open only an inch. I heard a noise. A dog was barking weakly inside the car, watching as I came closer. It was too hot for a dog, I could tell. I slid off Molly and tried to open the doors, one by one, but the car was locked. The dog nosed the open window and whined. I could hear he was having trouble breathing. I ran down the walking path and called loudly, "Whose car is this? There's a dog inside and it's too hot. Hey!" I ran back up the path and I moved Molly to a tree where there was shade. I picked up a rock and tried to break a window. The rock bounced off the window. The dog, a border collie, pawed at the window. I tried the rock again. The dog laid down the back seat of the car, breathing hard. I took out my cell phone. I dialed Bud's number. He answered on the first ring. I started crying. "Bud, I need help. Dog locked in a hot car. I can't break the windows." "Where?" "Nature walk." "I'm coming." Before he hung up, I heard the siren through the phone. I looked for a bigger rock. I found one too large to move, and my tears dropped on it as I tried to pry it loose. I heard the sound of Bud's siren then, and I knew he was driving very fast. I could see the dome light churning. He drove behind the car and slid to a stop. He got out quickly, carrying a large, heavy bar. He looked very angry. "Try to get the dog to the other window so I can break this one over here," he said. I felt breathless. I spoke to the dogs with a small space. "Hey, pal, Bud's here." The dog turned and slowly came over to my side. He was panting. Bud crashed the driver's side window and glassed through across the front seat. He reached in and unlocked the doors. I opened my door and the dog licked my face and slowly jumped to the ground. He lay there and I sat on the ground next to him, stroking his soft fur. Bud went to his car and hurried back with a bottle of water and a bowl. "Here now." His voice was like a whisper. He poured water into the bowl and the dog got up to drink and drank. He finished. And then he walked over to lean against Bud, who was sitting on the ground too. "Hey, what are you doing?" A man with a fishing rod stood by his car. Bud stood very tall in his everyday clothes, jeans, and a plain white shirt. The dog stayed next to him. I think the question is, what are you doing leaving a dog in a hot car? Rascal's okay. Come, Rascal." The dog didn't move from Bud's side. "And you broke my window," the man yelled. "The dog was not all right," I said suddenly. He would have died in the heat, and that is against the law. You're just a kid, said the man. Let me introduce myself, said Bud. He held out his sheriff's badge. I'm Sheriff Ludoff, and I broke your window to save the dog. May I see your driver's license, please? The man pulled his wallet out of his pocket. He handed Bud his license. Bud wrote down the information in his notebook. Thank you, Richard. And may I see your fishing license? The man took a step backwards. I don't, he began. Have one, finished Bud. And you do not have a dog either. We don't mistreat animals here. You can't do that, said the man. I can, and I did. Move along now. The man stared at Bud for a moment. But before you go, I must confiscate your fishing equipment as well, said Bud. It's the law. Bud held out his hand, and the man handed over his fishing rod. He quickly opened the door, got in, and drove away. Do you think he knows he's sitting on broken glass? I asked. Not yet, said Bud. We heard a screeching of brakes. Now he knows, said Bud. Well, pal, you're my dog now, said Bud. Rasco's a dumb name for you, and Sylvie named you Pal. Pal wagged his tail. Bud looked to me. Good job, Sylvie, he said in a soft voice. All righty then. Come on, Pal, it's Mrs. Ludoff's birthday. I can't wait to show her what I got her. He opened the trunk and put the fishing rod inside. Maybe I'll give Mrs. Ludoff the fishing rod as well. Without a pause, Pal jumped into the back seat of Bud's car. Bud smiled at me as Pal leaned over and licked his ear. And as he drove off, I could see two heads close together inside the car. Bud and his dog. All righty then, I said to Molly as we headed home. She liked it when I talked to her. I thought about Tinker and Bernie. I thought about Bud and Pal. I almost knew something. What was it? A breeze came up and blew my thoughts away. It was the end of my day. Find a yellow-eyed friend to look into your eyes. Find a wise blue-eyed friend to hug. Sylvie Bloom. Is there a word for today? A man breaks the glass of a hot car, saving a dog so they can care for one another. The word is love. Sylvie Bloom. In the night, I wake up from sleep with a sudden sharp memory of the thought a breeze had taken away. Tinker had told me I almost knew. The look of Bud finding his dog. The look of Tinker with Bernie. Family. Was it family that was enough for my mother? Do I deserve this? I turn on the light. Am I enough? I am surprised to hear myself say it aloud in the quiet dark. I leave the light on. When I wake up in the morning, the light has been turned off by someone. Thank you.